Better days are coming. Welcome, Nomad family, to Athlete Activism. It's a family affair, part of our monthly webinar series. I am Anthony Thomas, Nomad President-elect and the Director of Athletics here at Francis Parker School here in San Diego, California. In some ways, things are normal for some. Yesterday, I was on call and my good friend Tina Willard from Grays Lake North High School in Illinois was telling us that she had hosted her first basketball game. Everything went smoothly during the game because Tina is just a flat out excellent athletic administrator. But as Tina shared, she knew that they were experiencing some normalcy when a parent came up to her after the game complaining about playing time. I only hope that parents have some new game to come with and not bring that weak mess that they usually bring to us. But nonetheless, I digress. Throughout history, sports have had a profound impact on the fight for equality. And here's another mark in our history where a father and son have come together to stand for the cause through collegiate and professional sports. In the United States, sports has led the way in addressing and improving race issues. Within interscholastic athletics and sports in general, there exists a unique opportunity to lead the way in initiating a brave dialogue that results in a sustained change. The truth is, it is still too hard to have a genuinely respectful, decent, and humble discussion about prejudice, discrimination, and racism. To Black Americans, there is a system that continues to impact our lives every day. The most recent events shed light on this true silence that continues to breed more injustice. It's all right, and I tell people this all the time, that you don't have the lived experience. It does not mean that you cannot connect and check in on your Black colleagues and students to open a dialogue and invite conversation. Our guest today, Athletic Director Earl Edwards, is leading the change at UC San Diego by implementing programs and initiatives that will work towards combating systemic racism on campus and throughout the Big West Conference. Edwards accepted the position of Director of Athletics at UC San Diego in March of 2000. Since his arrival, UC San Diego has consistently been recognized nationally for its academic and athletic achievements, and in just 2 decades has risen from an NC2A Division III program to a Division II program, and this past summer raised their program to now Division I. Edwards has built several new facilities and enhanced others during his tenure, including a softball stadium, a baseball stadium and clubhouse, and a strength and conditioning center. The Triton Track and Field Stadium was updated with the video scoreboard and pole vault terraces. In 2019, he oversaw a major renovation of the Rymac Arena that included new seating areas, a 50 by 15 video scoreboard, and a modernized skybox suite. One that I was in, very impressive. They're allowed to do broadcasting from there, and now I can catch most UC San Diego games on ESPN3 if they're not on the bigger network. In March 2017, Edwards was named one of 28 National Association of Collegiate Directors of Athletics, Athletic Director of the Year. In 2019, he took on the biggest challenge of mentoring me and became a founding member of the Nomad Advisory Board. Earl, thank you for being here. And now his son, Earl Edwards Jr., affectionately known as EJ, represented the United States U17 national team at the 2009 World Cup. He then went on to play 4 full seasons at the best damn university in the land, University of California, Los Angeles, earning all Pac-12 honors in 2013 and 2014. In 2015, he was drafted by Orlando City in the MLS, where he played for 4 years. In 2019, he was traded to DC United and played 2 full seasons, and he's currently a member of the New England Revolution. During the 2020 season, EJ was a founding member of the historical Black Players for Change, an organization that has established to combat systemic racism within the MLS and its local communities. From a father-son perspective, our webinar today will provide a unique perspective on athlete activism, the Black experience in America, and the challenge of fighting for equality and social justice in our respective fields. So gentlemen, thank you. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now. Thank you for being here today. I'm so appreciative of your time, and I know that you want to save enough time to engage our attendees today. So I'm going to ask everyone to use the chat for your questions, and we will get to those at the end. So let's jump right in. Earl, many believe that after the murder of George Floyd, that the country was experiencing a reckoning when it comes to race. What did you do to support your student athletes when it came to their own reckoning and activism?
So Anthony, before I answer that question, I have to commend you and recognize all of those individuals that are a part of the Nomad organization that you created. I'm commending you all because it's another opportunity to have a platform to share the message of addressing racism and social injustice in our society. So I want to thank you for doing that, and I'm proud to be a member of your board. So as we all know, with the murder of George Floyd, that was the catalyst for a number of different organizations or individuals to get in line to address racism and social injustice. For me, as an athletic director, when I saw George Floyd being murdered, the first thing I thought was, one, I'm not going to be silent anymore about racism in our society. And the second thing was, what can I do to address racism? And hopefully everyone will be asking themselves that same question. So I met with my team and my teams and my coaches immediately. We had a town hall a couple of days after George Floyd's murder. There was a number of productive things that came out of that town hall. The first thing for me, and I'm somewhat embarrassed to say it, but when I had the town hall with the Black athletes and allowing them to express their experiences, not just in society, but within our institution as UC San Diego, it was very disheartening to hear the discrimination and the things that they were experiencing. I took that to make it a mission for our athletic department to reinforce one of our core values, which is inclusion with a focus on racism and social injustice. As a result of that, we came up with a number of different ways for our scholar athletes to use their social media platform to reach out and address racism. I'm actually extremely proud of the media that all of the teams put out. So that was one thing. We also created a partnership with this group, and I want everyone to pay attention to this. There's a professional group out there called the Ross Institute for Sport Equality. We're working with them as partners, and they're working with us to create an intentional and strategic approach to changing the culture in our department. And they're doing that by surveys and workshops where we'll get the results of those workshops and surveys to see where our gaps are and what directions we need to address moving forward. So those are just a few of the things that we've done to work with our athletes right off the bat after George Floyd's murder.
Thanks, Earl. EJ, we saw many professional sports leagues respond to the unrest and social injustice. How did the Black Players for Change help to move the MLS forward?
I want to start off, I'll echo some of my dad's sentiments. I want to thank you for putting this organization together, and thank you again for allowing us to utilize this platform to speak to you all today. I also want to thank all of you for coming on and hearing about our experience and here to continue to learn about what the Black experience is in this country. And I think far too often we have these white hot moments like George Floyd. People have their interest for a couple weeks, a month at a time. To be here 6 months removed and to see this many faces still engaged in something so significant, I'm very appreciative for all of you being here as well. In regards to what we've done with the BPC, it came together very quickly. We had guys just kind of in an Instagram chat voicing their feelings and opinions, and decided we needed to really take action, formalize a group, and create whatever change and impact we could within our league and our local communities. So to do that, we announced on Juneteenth last year. About a month later, we had our tournament in Orlando, the MLS is Back tournament. At the time, we were the second professional sports league in the country to return to play. The Women's Soccer League, NWSL, was first. And as we returned, we opened up that tournament with a silent protest that lasted 8 minutes, 46 seconds in commemoration of George Floyd. And that was really just to, it was nice to have MLS on board with that. They helped us with a lot of things there and getting that publicity on ESPN. And with that, we utilized those interviews to really call out the league and kind of force their hand and make sure they were in it long term to utilize their resources, work with us, and try to really create change that we know we're capable of creating with the platform we do have. So started off with that protest. We had another one down the road in alignment with the NBA when the Bucks decided to boycott a game on that Thursday following Jacob Blake's shooting. We followed suit, as did many other leagues. And just doing things like that, I think, kind of forced the hands of our professional sports leagues to dive into this, all in. And now we're working on utilizing those partnerships and relationships to create some initiatives within our league. The 4 initiatives we're working on with the MLS currently are civic engagement, upward mobility, grassroots, and access for lower income Black communities, and making sure the vendors on game days, that's where the league makes a lot of their money, trying to focus on hiring Black owned vendors for concessions and things of that sort. So that's kind of what we've been accomplishing up to this point in time, and hopefully that stuff will be unfolding this year.
Okay, thank you, EJ. And I think I want to express to our members that are listening here and what EJ said. It was just, it happened quickly, and you just have to take that first step. And it reminds me of Martin Luther King's quote where he said, "You don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step." So when we're talking about what we can do as ADs in our own community, our own organizations, take that first step in getting people together to address it. Because if you don't do that, you can't move forward. So you got to at least be bold enough to take that first step. And as EJ and his colleagues did, they took that first step, and now they're really affecting change. So EJ, thank you for your leadership on that. For the both of you, we know the bond between father and son is a unique one, but why did you guys choose to engage with addressing racism and social injustice as a family?
Well, I'll start off as a Black individual in America, racism is something that's a common conversation within the family. Understanding that you may not get the same opportunities as others, understanding that you have to work twice as hard. So racism has always been a topic within the family. EJ and I think we were both struck the same way, and I'll let him answer it. But once George Floyd was murdered and I saw that, I made a personal commitment not to be silent anymore as a Black individual, and hopefully others will feel the same. And when I made the commitment to make it a mission of mine to talk about racism and social injustice. EJ and I talked a lot about that. And when I discovered, and I was actually extremely pleased and proud to see that he was taking a leadership role within the Major League Soccer addressing these issues, we thought it might be good to talk about it. One, as a family, and then two, we're addressing it in two different levels from the standpoint of collegiate athletics, and it goes beyond that, but that's my primary focus. And he was working on it from a professional sports perspective. So once we had that conversation, it just made sense for us to talk about it together. EJ, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, as my father said, I think discussions of the Black experience in America is something that my dad instilled in me, and we talked about a lot at a young age. I think two things in particular. I've shared one with you, Dad, but I'll share another one now with the group that'll catch you off guard a little bit. But
Oh, wow.
growing up, you kept a book in your office. You know this one, not the Triumph, but the Struggle by Amy Bass. I'm still working on getting through the book, but the front cover of it is the picture from the 1968 Olympics, the Black Power protest. So for me, seeing that image in your office as a young kid, I believe had a profound impact on me. I was able to interview Dr. Harry Edwards numerous times, one recently, one back in middle school. And he was the organizer behind that protest, and he's someone that's had a profound influence on me as well. And then I'm pretty sure it's still up in your office, but you also had a large picture of Martin Luther King sitting upon, as I recall it as a kid, what seemed like a throne. And it was just quite the statement. And you've had that since I was born. So throughout the 90s, so you may have been more silent than you would like to been, but I think that picture, anyone that came into your office, I think that had a profound impact on people. And to be having that up in your office through the 90s, and I'm sure you still have it up now, it had an impact on me, and I think it probably has an impact on your colleagues as well. But yeah, I think more specifically, this came together. A former colleague of my dad's at University of Virginia reached out to my dad when I was in DC. This is when we formalized, I was still in DC, we formalized the BPC. So I was kind of in UVA's backyard. He saw what I was doing. Being a close friend of my father's, he asked if we can come on and speak to some of his student athletes. And just more than anything for me, doing this with my father and hearing about his experiences, I think the generational difference, you get kind of a twofold outlook on kind of what we both have been going through, and to hear from my father who's gone through the civil rights movement. He was born in Alabama, and to have that experience and hear those experiences, and then what I've gone through some years after that, you kind of get this dynamic of you're hearing it from two different generations, and I think we both have different ways of going about it, thinking about it, and I think it's important for people to hear it, and I'm again grateful that you guys are here to learn from us.
Thank you, EJ. Appreciate that. So in addressing racism, you have two separate spheres of influence. What are some of the strategies you're using? Earl, how are you impacting collegiate athletic directors? EJ, how are you impacting, players who can have an impact on young people in general? What are some of the strategies you're using?
So let me talk about sphere of influence, because I think this is an important part of this conversation about race. And that when I saw George Floyd being murdered, I immediately thought about my sphere of influence as an athletic director, particularly at a Division I program. And so I utilized that platform to work with my coaches and staff, as I said earlier, to focus on racism and social injustice, and using the core value of inclusion as the impetus for doing this. But I want to emphasize with everyone that when I really started analyzing my sphere of influence, we all have a sphere of influence that's much larger than I think we realize. And what I mean by that, when you look at your friends, you look at your family, you look at the community that you belong to, when you look at organizations that you might be a part of, when you put all the workplace, when you put all those things together, we impact or we can influence a lot of individuals. So my strategy has been to not only address the racism and social injustice from my campus in athletics, I've also become the chair of our conference committee, which is called the Big West Undivided, which is a group of administrators and scholar athletes. And I like the combination of the committee. And we're focusing on EDI issues throughout the conference, which somewhat gives us a regional impact because our conference includes the state of California from north to the south, as well as the University of Hawaii. So those are some of the spheres of influence, but I want everyone to think about the sphere of influence that you have, because too often I think individuals look at it, I'm just one person, what can I do? And the reality is you can do a lot with looking at the sphere of influence as I just addressed.
EJ, what about you and players?
Yeah,
Yeah.
from my end specifically, I know as a being a professional athlete, utilizing my social media channels when I am on the field, if I have a chance to protest or make a statement in interviews or utilize things of that sort, that's something I can do that's very specific to me. When I think about kind of the things my dad's touched on and you guys being athletic directors, I think so often there's so many people watching sporting events at every level, whether that's parents, friends, kids, all that. The influence you guys can have in terms of like in our league specifically, we've been working on, and I'm not suggesting you do this, but either eliminating the anthem or discussing in depth, like what are things that players can do to feel comfortable during the anthem, whether that's kneeling, not going out for the anthem, whatever that is. Or statements that can be made in support of movements. I think in the positions you guys are in, to have that stuff set in place for all your sporting events, you have so many parents, and whether they can be in the stands or not, people are watching online, grandparents are watching online, cousins, fam, like there's so many people, as my dad said, that you can influence, and you don't, especially now, you can't really see it with people not being in stands for games. But to implement things and statements and things that people would are kind of forced to see if they want to partake in watching your sporting events, your sphere of influence is much greater than people realize, again, to reiterate my father. But those are different things that I know we're trying to work with our league on, different policies and ways to go about things, and just different ways to think about how you can implement things in your sporting events to continue to support the movement.
Yeah. So we all know in doing this work, and all those who are on today, have continued to show a commitment to doing this work. We know that this work is hard. We know that this is not a sprint, that this is a marathon. And so I know the work that you guys have been doing, and I follow you religiously. But I also know we'd be naive to think that there are not some challenges that you've had to face in addressing racism, both on the collegiate and professional sports level. Can we name some of those challenges and really point them out so people understand not only the sacrifice you're making, but just the walls that we have to still overcome just to be able to, the simple idea of equality, but all of the walls that have come in front of you once you started to engage in this work?
So I'll start with, for me, there's three challenges that jumps out. I've been speaking to a number of different groups throughout the country and regionally, and three things that jumps out are, one is the issue of white privilege. The second one is conversation itself. And the third is people that either don't believe or understand institutional racism. So I'm going to address each of those rather quickly. The issue of white privilege, and we use that term, and often it's not uncommon for whites to feel defensive or maybe sometimes guilty, but the idea of white privilege and trying to explain to individuals that it's not anything to be ashamed of. It's not something you should feel guilty of. It's just a statement that says because of the color of your skin, you have more opportunities than people that are people of color. And I'll talk about that in a second when I talk about institutional racism. So that idea of getting away from being offensive when we talk about white privilege and therefore putting the individual in a defensive mode, which impacts the conversation you're trying to have. The second one is just trying to talk about race, period, which is a challenge for a lot of individuals. I've come up with a way that I think would help with those conversations to start it. I actually like a lot of acronyms. So the acronym I came up to start with conversations about race is PAL, P-A-L, and the P stands for setting the ground rules. P means no personal attacks during the conversation. The second one is to assume good intent, which is a challenge, but I've used it more lately and it's helped me to have conversation because if you assume good intent, then that puts you in a different position where you're not being triggered as much by things that people are saying. So assume good intent, and L stands for listen, and being a good listener, let the individual complete his or her thoughts as you're going through the conversation, because too often when you talk about race, people are triggered and they interrupt, and you don't get into the real essence of the conversation. The other part of that is to focus on the words and not so much the individual when you're having these conversations. So to give you a good example, if I was watching Kevin Adams throw a softball and I said, "Hey Kevin, you throw like a girl," someone comes up to me and says, "Earl, you're a sexist." I'm as far away from a sexist as you possibly can be, but the words were sexist, and that's what you should focus on during the conversation. And last but not least is just some quick examples of institutional racism, because I think that's a big part of the conversation. And that is, did you know that Blacks are 2 to 3 times more likely to be pulled over by the police? Did you know that not only are you pulled over by the police as a Black individual, you're 6 times more likely to be searched? Did you know that if 2 applicants for the same job, same resume, same experience, and one is Black and one is white, that the white person is 2 times more likely to get an interview? Did you know that if Black children in schools display challenging behavior and they're expelled and suspended, that white children display those same challenging behaviors are not? So those are just quick examples of institutional racism. And I think that's something that's often a challenge because people don't understand what that really is.
Thanks, Earl. EJ, what about on the professional sports level? What are those walls?
Yeah, so for us, coming together and formalizing our organization has been really advantageous for us. I think it established a large level of credibility. So with that has come a tremendous amount of outreach and resources and different organizations wanting to work with us. The difficulty with that is the legal side of how this is actually going to be formalized and what the work will look like. So the difficulty is being really eager to want to get things done and get things in place, and then being slowed down by the process of, again, the legal side of things and exactly what the work will look like, who's getting what the work will be from our side, what the resources and work will be from the other side. So the eagerness to want to get things done and then being slowed down by the diligent process is really the hardest roadblock for us. Fortunately, there were some things we were able to do right away. in formalizing a partnership with the NBA and the NBA PA, and trying to do what we can to get our players registered to vote that were eligible last year. And really just using our platforms to encourage people to get out and vote going into the election last year. So understanding that we had about a 4 to 5 month window to get that done, that was a high priority for us. And we're fortunate enough to really get activated and involved in that. And that's something that took off right away. Along with that, we partnered with the U.S. Soccer Foundation, and we've been able to open mini pitches in lower income Black communities throughout the country. Fortunately enough, we're actually opening one in Claremont and San Diego tomorrow. We're doing a virtual opening for that I'll be a part of with some other BBC members, and we're actually announcing our partnership with the Women's League. They've also formalized a group as well, and they've joined our partnership with the U.S. Soccer Foundation. So now we have a joint group, the women's organization, our organization, opening these mini pitches in lower income areas. So not only are these kids with these mini pitches going to be seeing young Black professional athletes on the male side, but also on the female side. So that representation is important for us as well. So some things we've been able to implement right away. Some things are taking more time, but the things that are taking more time, that diligent process is just to make sure that we know that these organizations are in it for the long haul, and we're putting something into place that's going to create lasting change.
That's outstanding. I know my board members won't mind me saying this, but Nomad has faced similar challenges where we have a lot of organizations who want to work with us, but then they want to tell us how to do the work. So it's like, I think we can handle this, but
Yeah.
you have to learn to partner with people, and I'm looking on my screen, and there's no one better to partner with than Kristen Sheehan of Play Like a Champion, who's on here, who's a dear friend. But, as we keep trying to spread our message and do the things that we need to do, we do run into those issues, people concerned about their brand and whether or not their brand should be mixed with our brand, and what do we really stand for? And I'm like, how can you be against us trying to create pathways for underrepresented athletic directors to have an opportunity to do these great jobs and to impact kids' lives? Why are you so protective of that? And why is there only one way to do it? I don't know. Don't get me started, because I'll get in trouble today, and I ain't trying to get in trouble. It's a Thursday, and my sister Alicia De Jesus is giving me the look, so I'm not even going to start. I got one more question for you, then I'm going to open it up to our wonderful attendees today. And this one is directly for them. Do you have any recommendations? We get into this work, sometimes we get stuck. We start off doing something great, and then we don't know the next step. We've run out of ideas. Do you have any recommendations for things that ADs or individuals can do to address racism in their community or even on their campus?
Well, EJ, why don't you go first? Pops is going to turn it over to you, because I've been going first the whole time.
That's fine. That works. And I'll keep it brief, and it'll kind of echo off of your last kind of take on these conversations. So for me, the thing I'm most passionate about, while we do have these partnerships in place and things we're trying to implement, the thing I'm most passionate about is forums like this. I really enjoy speaking to my counterparts about racism and my experience in this country, and that level of growth that can happen during these conversations. So specifically, I want to point out that I think so often you hear these conversations being talked about as uncomfortable conversations. And if you think to being a kid, or even now if you're significant others, if someone says hey, we need to have a conversation, it might be uncomfortable, or we need to have an uncomfortable conversation, you immediately that's not a conversation you're looking forward to having. Or even want to have. So for me, I've looked at these conversations more as these are growth conversations. It's an opportunity to learn. And at the end of the day, we're all here to make the world a better place. I know that's very fluffy, or however you want to call it, but we are here to make the world a better place, and particularly make it a better place for Black people in this country. And it's been a long time coming. So again, thank you for all for being here. But if you keep that in mind, as you enter these conversations, and not just here, but when you go to talk to young Black kids in this country, white people in this country, when you go to have these conversations, if you look at it as an opportunity to grow, and with the end goal being to improve this world for Black people, it's really hard not to, in my opinion, to not get excited about that. So to look at it that way, as opposed to an uncomfortable conversation, it's uncomfortable because it's been so long with us not being able to engage in these conversations and just avoiding it. But I think as you get into them, and hopefully as we get into this Q&A portion, which my father and I both enjoy the most about all this, so hopefully we can wrap up our answers soon. That's what we enjoy most. So to be engaged, and I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I do, but to engage and think about it that way, and it's an opportunity to learn, grow, hear our experiences, and again, ultimately make the world a better place.
Thank you, EJ.
Good stuff, EJ. I'm really proud of you. This is actually a lot of fun, the family affair here. So before I get into the recommendations, I've got to make some other quick statements that relates to athletics in particular. And that is, I've talked about inclusion as a core value for us as a athletic department, and I'm sure inclusion is a core value for all of us that are in athletics. And I really see athletics itself as a laboratory for personal development. We do much more than play games. We teach the kids a lot through what they learn through sports. We end up being surrogate parents, guidance. There's a lot of things we do with our athletes to make them better individuals. But when if you look at inclusion from the standpoint of chemistry, and I'm tying this into athletics, we all know that more often than not, the difference between a good team and a great team is the chemistry amongst the players. By focusing on inclusion or addressing racism, we are creating an environment where the teammates and the people involved in the program really do get to know each other and respect each other and feel a connection. So I actually think this will be an advantage moving forward when it comes to the performance of our teams. As far as things you can do right off the top as athletic directors, and I know it's a challenge, but whatever you can do with your staff to diversify your staff, and often that has to do more with the headmaster or the principal, but whatever you can do to encourage people to diversify your staff, then you have diversity thought, and then you have a lot more respect for people as individuals. Some quick specific things, because we really want to jump into the Q&A. Again, utilizing your sphere of influence is critical. The other thing I would say, there's small things you can do, like don't laugh at racist jokes. Don't say that you're colorblind. To say that you're colorblind is not to acknowledge who I am as a Black person. It's almost like saying you're invisible. Embrace the fact that we are Black, and not to say things like you're colorblind, because that doesn't make it better. It actually makes it worse. And last but not least, well, actually, there's two more things, but the I want to talk about deflections, and I think this is really key. That when you're talking about race, we've got to get away from deflections. Quick examples of deflections are all lives matter. Hell, everybody knows all lives matter, not an issue. Racism is the issue. Blue lives matter. Yes, cops' lives matter, not the issue. It's a deflection from the real issue of racism. When there's protests, and we've had a lot of tremendous protests that's much more diverse in the past, meaning that I see more whites engaged versus the victimized individuals. But when the protests are occurring and there's some violence, don't focus on the violence. I'm actually mad on this one because people spend more time talking about the goddamn violence versus the real issue is the protest. We don't condone violence, and we shouldn't condone violence. And often the violence piece is somewhat strategic, where you have antagonistic groups purposely creating violence to deflect from the issue of racism and social injustice. Implicit bias training, I think everyone should go through that. I'm going to recommend two books that people should read or consider. One is called The Race Talk by Derek Sue Wing, The Conspiracy of Silence. And the other one is White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. Both of those are extremely well written. The White Fragility is really speaking to whites and trying to get white individuals to understand the racism and how it impacts us as a society. And I'm going to end it by just saying that what we can all do as individuals is make a commitment, and that fighting racism starts with you as an individual. Those are my recommendations, and I'm ready for some hot questions.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate that and all that you said. And EJ, thank you. I have been wrestling with that same concept of uncomfortable conversations, and I am now have moved to more intentional conversations because it's only uncomfortable because you don't want to have it. So if you want to have the conversation, it becomes very easily. And if you have intentional conversations, that's one way of doing it. So thank you for that. So we do have a question, and I'm going to open it up and let the person speak because I think we might as well just have this open up. So CJ, I know you had a question. Why don't you ask the question yourself?
Anthony, she had to leave.
Oh,
she's
okay.
Actually doing a presentation, but I would piggyback on that. And I think EJ, I think he saw that and he kind of referred to it, but if he can elaborate, and for those that don't see that question in the chat, what CJ did put out there, and she was still on when EJ was speaking. So thank you for that, EJ. But she put in that the challenge of being a Black man in sports is real. How are you able to engage women of color and create allyship in your respective workspaces to join the fight for change? And I don't know if you wanted to elaborate, but I do know you did address that a little bit, and she was still on.
I would love to elaborate. I just saw the question now, actually, so I'm glad I touched on it before she left. But for me, the NWSL, a couple players reached out to our organization just to ask questions about how we formalize with interest of formalizing their own group. We were very open to helping them through that. For me in particular, I think Black women in this country are marginalized more than anybody else. So for us, and too often they're unsung heroes in the progression of the Black experience in this country. So when they came to us looking to figure out how to formalize, and then we had the opportunity to partner with them, for me and being a board member of our group, I was adamant that that's something that must happen. If you look across the board, the WNBA, in my opinion, leads all leagues when it comes to being on the forefront of this movement. So I think too often women do not get the credit they deserve. Black women in particular do not get the credit they deserve. So for us to be able to join forces with them, utilize our platform to amplify their voices, and follow their lead on a lot of things. I know there's going to be things as we move forward where they're going to be front runners on things, and we'll follow their lead and learn from them. And I look forward to doing so. So I think, again, to partner with them was something that was a must, and I'm looking forward to working with them moving forward.
Earl, what about you? I know we had just talked recently, and I had just found out that we had 4 African-American athletic directors in the UC system, all in Southern California, at UC Irvine, UC Riverside, yourself, and Martin Drummond at UCLA. But how have you worked with women organizations or even on campus to answer that question?
We've been working with a number of different groups, and as a takeaway from what EJ said, the idea of partnerships needs to be a theme or a focus of ours. So we have a partnership on campus with the Black Resource Center, the LGBTQ Center, the Women's Center, and we're working with all of those to not only focus on racism in general, but how it impacts Black females. So that's something that we're doing through partnerships. And I just want, it's such a important statement that EJ just made, and it's one that we all are aware of, but we have a tendency not to focus on it as much as we should. And that's the issue of Black women and the double jeopardy that they face when it comes to racism and discrimination in general. So that needs to be more of a focus for us across the board. The other thing for us within athletics, we're doing more things to focus on women's initiatives within the athletic department, Black and white, again, because of the lack of emphasis that we have on women in general.
Thank you. Thank you. Katasha, do you want to ask your question since I see you here still?
Yes, I think you kind of touched on a little. First of all, good afternoon. And just want to, how do you implement it a little bit more? How you implement it in the high school level? I'm in a predominantly Black high school, but they still don't want to ask the challenging questions and push those students to ask more questions. Even when you do, you kind of get a pushback, like I don't say that, but you still need to talk about it.
Mm.
Well, I'll just say I know the high school is a challenge in so many ways, and kudos to all of you, not only with the kids but dealing with the parents. Those two things are huge. I think it would be good. I don't know if you have any. I'm going to guess you have student organizations or student groups for a lot of different things within the high school environment. Is that fair to say?
We are right now we're virtual, so it's kind of hard to do different types of groups. I'm actually in the process of trying to develop a more strategic student athletic leadership council,
Yeah,
especially
right.
dealing with that. So I do have, but guess what? It's mostly girls who are interested, and the boys are like, lackadaisical because you don't have the football coach to buy in, or some of those coaches to buy in. So
Well,
I have some girls that are interested. And when I put out the APB, and we did have a Zoom meeting, but I also want to go get those young men involved too.
yeah, so I'll say, yeah, starting organizations makes a lot of sense, but you hit on the biggest challenge you have based on your statement is you need to talk to the principal, headmaster, or whoever it is, and reinforce that this should be a value of ours, and it's not even an option for the football coach or anybody else to deflect from this conversation. I don't want to say it's a requirement, but if it's coming from the principal or headmaster, that these are things that we need to do to move forward, creating affinity groups, getting the coaches behind that, particularly with the males, to encourage them to be a part of it, because it's part of the learning process for them as individuals so that they can go out and be outstanding citizens in society.
Hi, Mr. Edwards. I'm Sylvia in Dallas. I just wanted to let you know we started a group because of the George Floyd murder and everything last summer, and all that's transpired with the riots at the Capitol and everything. We've put together a student athlete group called Leaders in Training. It's called Lit Group. So it's an application process, and we started that last August, and we put together different sessions that they can partake. It's all virtual because many of our students are virtual learners right now. But we have different sessions talking about different topics each session, and have guest speakers and different activities and projects for them to do. This month, our focus is on social justice. So we'll have somebody, a guest speaker speaking on that. But our intent with that is to open up dialogue and to allow them a platform to have conversations with each other about some of the things that are going on in the world that affects them directly, but things that they see on TV, and how that they can make adjustments to their leadership styles and everything, and take that back to campuses, to their teams and classmates. Another reason,
Awesome.
another thing we do is partner them virtually, and we allow them to exchange emails and give them questions that prompt them for discussion, so that they can meet other students that are across town that they may not ever get to meet. People that are not like them, girls, boys, it doesn't matter what the race is, but I want them to introduce themselves to other students across town so that they have dialogue and then they make a friend, and then in the platform they introduce their new friend to the group, and just find out something different about them, something that they can engage and connect with. And they would never ever have ever met them ever unless they, unless we provided the platform to do so. So we're really excited about it. We have different things planned along the way for that, but we're just really proud of that group.
I have a feeling, Sylvia, that a lot of people are going to be reaching out to you, right, moving forward based on the question that we had right before that. So thank you for sharing that outstanding process that you created. Awesome.
Yep, and I want to encourage everyone to get Sylvia's information because she is the bomb. As you know, she was on our Life of Duality webinar. She is a superstar down there in Dallas, Texas, and a leader for us all. So Sylvia, thank you for being here. It's great to see you again. Earl, another question that I had, and then I'm gonna ask Michael Coleman to talk about his situation because he's got an opposite situation that I think is interesting to talk about. But Earl, you're doing a great job. I know you are with your staff and diversity. But what about your administration and admitting kids? As a private school, how do we go about admitting kids and admitting a diverse student population? What are the conversations that we need to be having with the admissions teams around that?
So that's a great question, and I'll try to do it briefly. One, for UC San Diego, and it's a misconception that's out there that we don't admit a lot of Black students or students of color or diversify our staff. And the reality is that we do admit a lot. The challenge that we always have is that we're still fighting this racist perception of us because of an incident that took place probably 15 years ago. And the other issue is that as we're recruiting these same Black students or students of color, they're also being recruited by other Ivy Leagues, other schools, and the other schools have bigger financial packages. But the reality is that we're taking a much different approach now in terms of creating a much more inclusive environment on our campus. It'll be interesting to see what happens as a result of that moving forward when it comes to recruiting Blacks on our campus. But we have a very progressive approach to it. We admit a lot of Black students, but they just don't come because it comes down to walking around the campus. If you don't see people that look like you, you're less likely to attend, and that's something that we have to fix.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Michael, you have a unique situation, so I wanted to bring it to the whole group to maybe respond to and give you some support there.
Sure. Just the opposite in my career, probably 20 plus careers. Most of my time has been spent in independent college prep schools, in AIS schools that are predominantly white. I currently am the athletic director at a co-ed Catholic high school in Ohio, once again, which is predominantly white. So I go back to my sister's quote, sometimes when you have the extreme, it's hard to move the needle forward and have any significant change or garner the type of interest that you need when you have major issues that we have. So the comment that I added is that sometimes when you have an extreme or completely opposite, but you do have allies that are like-minded, sometimes you can bring smaller groups together, one group from an all-white school, one group from an all-Black school, and with the right agenda and facilitator and purpose, I think you could make some significant moves and adjustments, or at least get kids thinking the right way and listening to other and creating some of the conversations that we need to have.
Yeah, that's awesome, Michael. We should be in touch because I think we have some shared ideas that we could you can utilize, and between Ira Childress and I and you, we could probably really come up with some good ideas and supporting that effort. So, hey, so I want to be mindful of time. It is 11:01. And just want to remind you all that on February 25th, we will be back for sort of a part 2 of this conversation. This is going to be from a coach's perspective with Mike London, the head coach of William and Mary, the head football coach of William and Mary, and Coach Charles Adams, the head football coach at Minneapolis North High School. And if you haven't heard of Coach Charles Adams, if you watch Real Sports with Brian Gumble, he was featured on the last episode being a Minneapolis police officer and dealing with the George Floyd situation and being a football coach, who then turned into being a student resource officer at his school, only to have the Minneapolis Public Schools cut the contract. And so it's an interesting story. So I encourage you all to be here for that on February 25th. And then on March 11th, we will have mental health and athletics, something that we really need to touch on, not only for ourselves as AD, but for our kids. And that's going to be featuring Ivy Watts, who is a former Division II All-American track star. And she's going to come on and walk us through some things with mental health. So we're excited about our next 2 webinars and all the work we're doing. I see my good friend Jen Brooks is on here. I want to make everyone known and aware that Nomad and the global community of women are on the same page together. And we will be offering a wonderful resource come March 9th when we host we're hosting together and presenting this organization called PATH, which is created by an alumnus of my school here at Parker. She's a former USA volleyball player, and she's created some resources for coaches and students on leadership. And we're looking forward to presenting that, but then also talking about our continued plans of working together. Jen, do you want to add anything before we go?
No, global community is just excited to connect with Nomad and work together.
Yes. So we are trying to stay on top of it in all angles, and certainly appreciate you all today. We will take some of the questions that we didn't get to and throw them to our good friends EJ and Earl, and they might be able to get back to us. But I want to thank you too again, Earl. Thank you for just being my rock here in San Diego. Moving down from the San Francisco Bay Area, it was a little bit of a culture shock. But you have been my rock here in San Diego, and we are definitely appreciative of that. And EJ, I think he just dropped off, but we're just so proud of EJ as a product of San Diego. Oh, there he is. EJ, we're so proud of you as a man, as a professional, as a father. You got 4 dogs. I don't know how you do it all, but we're just really proud of you as a Bruin and everything. And you're always welcomed. And so thank you for being here, EJ, and good luck with your season.
Thank you. I appreciate being on and providing the platform.
All right, folks. So we'll see you February 25th for our next one. And as always, don't be afraid to reach out. We're not alone in this. We'll keep working together, and we'll see you real soon.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Good one.
Thank you all for being here.
Remember, fighting racism starts with you.
Yes, sir.
All right. Take care.
All right.
Yeah.